Hey there, Cinemaster fans. Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. The film begins in the year 740 with the good wizard Merlin, whose job is to protect the world from evil forces. Merlin taught the secret of his power to 3 sorcerers, Balthazar, Veronica, and Horvath. Unfortunately, Merlin was supposed to give his power to only 2 of them because the 3rd sorcerer, Horvath, betrayed him after being influenced by Morgana, the queen of evil sorcery and Merlin's enemy. Morgana, with Horvath's help, plans to kill Merlin and prepare to awaken the dead and take over the world. While Balthazar and Veronica try to stop her, Morgana takes over Veronica's soul, who sacrifices herself to save Balthazar. Her soul is transferred to Veronica's body, and Morgana tries to kill her from within. Balthazar imprisons her in a doll called the Grimhold. Over the years, Balthazar captures all of Morgana's followers, including Horvath, inside the Grimhold, until he finds the chosen one who can defeat Morgana and free Veronica, his beloved. This is because before dying, Merlin gave Balthazar a dragon-shaped ring and asked him to find the chosen one who would defeat Morgana. The ring itself would choose this person and be at their command. Balthazar begins searching for this child everywhere across the ages but fails. We then move to the year 2000 in New York City with a child named David, who is on a school trip that day. David, who is teased on the school bus for having a crush on his friend Becky, arrives at the trip location with a classmate. He sends a note to Becky asking if she wants to be just friends or close friends. Becky writes a response and leaves it for him, but before David can retrieve it, the note flies away from him, moving from person to person. David chases it until it flies down a corridor and continues moving from person to person until it flies into a narrow passage or gets caught among many papers in the street. He watches as the note enters the door of a strange-looking building selling antiques called Arcana Cabana. He moves to enter the place and explore the old artifacts. Suddenly, Balthazar appears before him and asks David what brought him there. David explains about the note that got lost and entered the place, and he was searching for it. Balthazar is surprised that coincidence brought David there and gives him the dragon ring, offering him to try it. David hesitates and decides to leave, but Balthazar magically closes the door, preventing him from leaving. David is forced to try the ring, takes it from Balthazar, and is surprised when the metal dragon begins to move, wraps around David's palm, and turns into a ring. The ring chooses David, and Balthazar tells him he will become a great wizard when he grows up. He asks David not to touch anything and goes to the basement to bring a magical spellbook from there. However, David accidentally releases the Grimhold, which Balthazar had hidden inside the wall, and holds it in his hand. The Grimhold falls to the ground, opens, and releases many insects that gather in front of him until the sorcerer Horvath appears. Upon seeing David, Horvath asks what year it is and attempts to harm David, but Balthazar arrives, pushes him away, and sticks him to the ceiling. He tells David he has been searching for him for 1,000 years and will explain everything later. Before retrieving the Grimhold from the floor, Horvath manages to strike him with his staff, freeing himself. He then descends to Balthazar, and they begin to fight. The Grimhold falls in front of David. Horvath starts dueling Balthazar with a magical sword, but Balthazar overcomes him and knocks him to the ground. They start throwing magical spells at each other until Horvath creates a fire barrier between him and Balthazar. Before taking the Grimhold from David, Balthazar attacks him again and manages to immobilize him. He then asks David to escape quickly with the Grimhold and traps himself with Horvath inside an old jar. As soon as David escapes, he throws the Grimhold in fear. He meets his teacher and tells him what happened. When the teacher enters the place, everything appears normal, and they think David is imagining things. Meanwhile, his friends see a stain on his pants and think he wet himself, teasing him. We then see Balthazar and Horvath trapped in the old jar. 10 years later, David leaves his house with his friend, saying he has a physics lesson to present at college today. We discover that he still keeps the dragon ring in his locker. He goes to the university to give the lecture, feeling nervous and awkward until he meets Becky, the girl he liked when he was young. After they reconnect, they recall the Arcana Cabana incident. David tells her he realized he was hallucinating at the time. After the lecture, they go out together, and David learns that Becky works at a radio station because of her love for music. He accompanies her to the station, where the broadcast equipment is damaged due to lightning. Due to David's love for physics, he repairs it easily, allowing them to resume work. Later, he returns to a small lab he owns and tells his friend about meeting Becky. He is working on an invention that generates plasma rays, connecting it to the music from Becky's station. The plasma starts moving with the music. Meanwhile, we see a man blaming his wife for buying the jar that imprisoned Balthazar and Horvath. He is surprised it moves as if someone is trapped inside. Suddenly, black smoke emerges from the jar and gathers until Horvath appears. He takes the jar and throws it out the window to dispose of Balthazar before he escapes. But Balthazar manages to free himself at the last moment, climbs a tall building, and casts a spell on a metal eagle there. Meanwhile, David returns home and finds Horvath waiting for him, asking about the Grimhold he took years ago. David tells him he threw it on the street when he left the place, but Horvath threatens to torture him until he reveals its location. David quickly escapes the house, and Horvath magically releases 3 ferocious wolves from a picture, ordering them to chase David. David tries to escape the wolves, enters a subway station and traps them behind a door. But when Horvath arrives, the wolves enter through another door, finding David hiding on the train tracks. And when they attack them, Balthazar arrives and trying to turn them into small wolves. Then he hits Horvath. David is shocked when he sees him riding on a metal eagle, and before Horvath strikes David, Balthazar throws a large waterhaul at him, trapping him inside. He then takes David with him on the bird and turns the wolves back into pictures before the train hits them. Horvath manages to free himself at the last moment, and then Balthazar returns to the rooftop with David. David sees him as he returns the eagle to its natural place on the rooftop. He then tells him that he thought he was sick after what he saw when he was young. Balthazar tells him they must prevent Horvath from freeing Morgana and the other sorcerers trapped inside the Grimhold. When David says he wants to live his life normally, Balthazar brings his wardrobe from the house to show David that he still has the ring. He then learns about the location of the Grimhold, so he takes David to the place where his old car is in a garage, and he drives it out, restoring it in seconds. On the way, he explains to David his love for physics and tells him that he is a natural sorcerer and that he just needs to change the properties of any material to transform it into something else, like the fire he conjured from nothing. Meanwhile, Horvath goes to the location of Arcana Cabana and, through telepathy, is able to see the Chinese man he took long ago. A man arrives in a car and scolds Horvath for standing in the middle of the road, so Horvath easily gets rid of him. Balthazar arrives with David at the Chinese neighborhood where they are and leaves David outside while he enters the house. He sees an old Chinese woman and asks about her, telling her she resembles a small doll. She tells him she almost knows its location, but Balthazar suddenly strikes her, revealing that he discovered it was Horvath, who had disguised himself and reached the Grimhold before Balthazar. A sorcerer named Sun Locke is released from it and begins to attack Balthazar, who dodges his magic and strikes him, causing him to fall from the building. Balthazar exits through the window and sees David standing in front of Sunlock, urging him to flee quickly. Sunlock begins to animate a dragon on his belt, turning a toy dragon on the street into a real one, and it starts chasing David. Meanwhile, Balthazar manages to restrain Horvath, takes the Grimhold from him, and escapes the building. David then calls for his help to get rid of the dragon, but Balthazar asks him to clear his mind and deal with Sunlock and his dragon. Indeed, David manages to strike Sunlock's dragon, and Balthazar also throws a fireball at Sunlock, burning the dragon, which then falls on him, killing him. David tells Balthazar that he is very happy with what he did. As the police arrive at the scene, Balthazar disguises himself and David as policemen, successfully deceiving the real officers, and they leave the area. Balthazar then tells David that he doesn't mind if he wants to quit, but David says he wants to continue and train more. Balthazar then takes him to his lab to practice magic, hides the Grimhold, and gives David a small magic book to learn from. The book unfolds into a large volume, and Balthazar begins training David in magic, drawing a strange circle on the ground. He tells David that if he enters the circle and agrees to be a sorcerer, there will be no turning back. David agrees and enters the circle, and Balthazar declares him his apprentice, saying the ring he has will turn his thoughts into reality. He gives him shoes similar to his own to wear, and they begin their training, although David still lacks experience in magic. Meanwhile, Horvath starts gathering followers from the sorcerers to reclaim the Grimhold and goes to a well-known sorcerer named Drake Stone, famous for his magic tricks. Drake recognizes Horvath after seeing him, and Horvath tells him that Balthazar has found the Chosen One who will defeat them along with Morgana. At that time, Balthazar is teaching David how to control a fireball, and David accidentally controls a large fireball. They then go out for dinner together on the street, and David sees Becky, telling Balthazar that she is the girl he loves. Balthazar warns him, saying she is in danger, but David ignores him and runs after Becky, walking with her to the metro station. At that moment, a thief appears and steals Becky's belongings, fleeing from them. David chases him after putting on the ring, managing to move a metal trash can with it and knock the thief down. He then returns to Becky, gives her back her belongings, and tells her he was able to do that because he's been training in boxing recently. He bids her farewell and takes her number, and Balthazar appears before him, taking him away. They return to the lab to continue their training. Becky later arrives at the lab as per her agreement with David, and Balthazar leaves them alone. He then goes to Arcana Cabana and retrieves an old necklace belonging to his beloved Veronica. David is still in the lab with Becky, showing her his invention, which Becky admires for the plasma beams moving to the rhythm of the music. The next day, David goes with her to their college and bids her farewell, rushing to the bathroom. There, he is surprised by the sorcerer Drake, who tells him he knows he is the chosen one, hangs him on the wall for a while, then lets him down, asking him to use his magical powers in front of him. David fails, and at that moment Horvath enters, telling Drake to stop joking. When David tries to escape, Horvath brings him back and asks him about the location of the Grimhold. David, of course, refuses to speak, so Horvath tells him that Balthazar lied to him and didn't tell him who was trapped inside the Grimhold. At that time, Balthazar arrives, hangs Drake, and throws him aside, starting to engage with Horvath after casting a spell on the bathroom mirror, turning it into liquid silver. Each tries to trap the other inside the mirror, but Drake attempts to strike Balthazar, who dodges the blow, causing it to hit Horvath and trap him inside the mirror. Balthazar then easily defeats Drake and leaves with David, who asks Balthazar to tell him the truth and reveal who is trapped inside the Grimhold. Balthazar indeed tells him about Morgana, who is trapped in the Grimhold, and also about the sorcerer Merlin, who cast a spell on them, preventing them from aging until they find the chosen one. This means David is likely one of Merlin's kin, and Balthazar tells him he is the only one who can defeat Morgana. Meanwhile, Horvath goes to the university where David is studying and manages to find out the address of David's lab. The one with Balthazar learns the fusion spell that Morgana used to trap Veronica's soul inside her body. Then David remembers that Becky is arriving soon. Balthazar, determined to continue his training, agrees to let him meet Becky on the condition that he returns with a clear mind to continue training. David starts preparing cleaning tools to tidy up the lab, but he tries to speed things up so he can change his clothes. He casts a spell on the brooms and mops to clean on their own, then changes his clothes and returns to check on the tools, only to find they have caused chaos and flooded the place due to the spell he cast. He fails to tidy up again because Becky arrives. David is very anxious and prevents her from entering, claiming there's a problem in the lab. Becky leaves upset, and David returns to the lab to salvage what he can. Amidst the chaos, he is about to fall into the water, which has become electrified. Balthazar arrives just in time to save him and restore everything to its place. David, frustrated, tells Balthazar he is not the chosen one, questioning how he can defeat the strongest witch when he can't control a few brooms. But Balthazar remains confident in his strength. David goes to find Becky with her friends, walking away silently, but Becky notices him and follows. David reaches the rooftop, a place he visits with Balthazar, and sees Becky coming after him. He apologizes for what happened, and Becky accepts his apology, hinting that she likes him. Meanwhile, Balthazar is in the lab and sees David, but realizes it's actually the sorcerer Drake, not David. Drake attacks Balthazar. Horvath arrives, releasing enchanted smoke to search for the Grimhold. The smoke indeed finds the hidden Grimhold, allowing Horvath to see and take it. He tells Balthazar it's time to free Morgana. Balthazar frees his bound hand and strikes Horvath, but Drake counters and knocks him down. Before Horvath can throw knives to kill him, David arrives just in time to stop Horvath's magic and save Balthazar. However, Horvath manages to escape with the Grimhold. David and Balthazar begin to pursue them. Horvath transforms the car he and Drake are in into a fast vehicle using magic, and Balthazar does the same with their car, continuing the chase. Horvath releases smoke from his wand to distract Balthazar. He then opens a portal in a large mirror in the street, pushing Balthazar's car into the mirrored world. Balthazar and David find themselves trapped in this world, needing to exit through another mirror to return to the real world. Horvath watches them from the real-world mirrors, breaking each one he encounters to trap Balthazar. Balthazar spots a large piece of a mirror still falling and quickly passes through it, returning to the real world to resume the chase. Horvath lures Balthazar into a trap, transforming their car into a garbage truck. He instructs Drake to drop an iron box on Balthazar's car to kill them. Balthazar reverses the car quickly, and David wants to help, accidentally transforming their car into an old one, causing it to stall. Drake drops the box, destroying the car, but David and Balthazar manage to escape. Balthazar chases Horvath through the crowd. Horvath transforms a woman on the street into Veronica, Balthazar's lover, deceiving him and making him forget about Horvath. David sees this and realizes Horvath tricked him. Balthazar later tells David about his love for Veronica and how Morgana trapped her soul inside Veronica's body. David promises to return Veronica after defeating Morgana. Horvath and Drake discuss the final layer of the Grimhold, which contains a sorceress named Abigail. Once she is freed, the next layer will be Morgana, and any sorcerer or magic trapped within the Grimhold requires another sorcerer's power to be freed. Horvath betrays Drake, stealing his power and ring, freeing the sorceress Abigail, who then kidnaps Becky from her workplace, bringing her to Horvath. Afterward, Horvath steals her power as well, finishing her to free Morgana. David and Balthazar arrive at Drake's house, where Horvath is present. Balthazar falls into a quicksand-like rug trap, sinking into it. David sees the Grimhold, picks it up, and sees Morgana's image on it. However, Horvath has Becky and demands David hand over the dragon ring to free Morgana, as she is the only sorcerer requiring 3 rings to be freed. David complies, handing over the ring and Grimhold, and Horvath leaves him stunned. Balthazar frees himself and tells David he did the right thing to save Becky, then flies to the location where Horvath intends to free Morgana. David calls his friend Ben, asking him to bring a plasma ray generator from the lab, finding Balthazar has left Veronica's necklace for him to give to her if he dies. Horvath reaches a well-chosen location and begins to free Morgana, who emerges from the Grimhold in Veronica's form, casting spells to release other sorcerers. Each spell releases a fireball, using satellite dishes on the buildings to amplify the energy and create a circle of dark magic. David arrives with Becky, asking her to move a dish from the rooftop to disrupt the signal. Balthazar arrives, sneaking in before Horvath notices. Before Horvath can destroy the Grimhold, Balthazar retrieves it and they engage in battle. David is on his way. Horvath animates a massive bull statue, which begins to chase Balthazar to eliminate him. Horvath attacks Balthazar, knocking him down, while Morgana's circle is nearly complete, and darkness begins to descend upon the earth. David arrives in time, electrocuting Horvath with his device, pulling him away from Balthazar, and using the metallic eagle to fend off the attacking bull. But the spirits of the desert are everywhere in the world. They start returning to their bodies again, and they gradually begin to awaken. But at that time, Becky manages to break the circle after moving a dish from the top of a building, and all the desert spirits die. The energy of the circle strikes Morgana, knocking her to the ground. Balthazar goes to Veronica, and they try to get Morgana out of her. After absorbing Morgana's spirit inside him to save his beloved Veronica, he asks David to imprison him in the Grimhold with Morgana. But David refuses, and Morgana emerges from Balthazar's body and starts attacking them. David then manages to deflect the fire Morgana unleashed without the ring, and Morgana realizes that David is the promised one. She attacks them fiercely, taking down Veronica and Balthazar. David attacks her with all his might, but fails to hit her. Morgana then takes her turn to attack David, who tries to protect himself from her attack while simultaneously moving the power cables. He starts connecting these cables to all the street lamps, and then he generates a strong lightning strike from them, hitting Morgana from all directions. He finishes her off with his magic and defeats her. Veronica tells David that Balthazar is dead, and David tries to help Balthazar, whose heart has stopped, until his heart responds, and he revives again. Veronica finally returns to Balthazar, and Becky meets David and tells him she loves him. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to activate the notification bell to receive the latest movie summaries. See you soon. Bye.